welcome everybody. I'm so excited to have this big room of people. Thank you so much for coming. Our session today is talking about building a sustainable technology refresh model. And I feel very fortunate to have both Derek Brown and Ryan Ross here with us to discuss their search and how they're accomplishing their plans for technology refresh. Overall, we're going to discuss kind of their strategy, the partners that they work with, kind of what led them to explore this kind of model, options for acquiring equipment, like who they looked at, what they did, review of contract terms and conditions, qualities needed in a partner, a strategic partner, and then the process that they went through to gain support for this kind of model. As all of you know, there's a lot of different players that need to be involved in these kinds of decisions, and they'll help walk us through kind of what they did. I'm Colleen O'Donnell. I'm with Insight Financial Services. We have been very focused on working with several K-12s, helping them with their technology refresh plans. And I'm going to just moderate and ask some questions, and it is an open. We'd like to hear from you. We'd like your questions, so please feel free to do that. We also have a way that you can do that through Twitter as well. So. Okay, so I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Okay. I'm Derek Brown, Chief Information Officer for Evergreen Public Schools. And tomorrow, Cinco de Mayo, we've been with Evergreen 2 years. So the fourth be with us today. And so Evergreen Public Schools, Southwest Washington, just across the river from Portland, 37 schools, 27,000-ish students. And I'll get into the rest of it later, but yeah, wonderful, excited to be there, and the center of everything we do is for students. I'm sure you all agree.
Ryan?
I'm Ryan Whitman-Morales. I'm the Director of Technical Operations for the Public School District. So we're right across the river from these fine folks, about 47,000 students, about 7,000 staff. My role is kind of interesting. I wear a lot of hats. I kind of lead our project management office as well as our innovation modernization program, which is all about sustainable infrastructure, sustainable staff and student equipment. So I've kind of lived with my head in this topic for about the past 5 years. So.
All right, great.
You could, yeah.
If you are so inclined, you can tweet your questions to @Leasing, and we will pull those up. Or you can just raise your hand, and we'll be happy to do that as well. Okay, so we'll go with Derek first. Just overall, describe the district's technology plan, kind of what you're doing, and what your goals are.
So I have to give a shout out to Joel Nefektridge. Joel is our Director of Infrastructure and Operations. And when I joined the district, was even interviewed for the district 2.5 years ago, Joel said, if you come in and you get the job, the first thing you have to do is help us with our 5,000 XP devices. And I'm like, okay, what's your budget? What's your plan? And he said, we just can't go into the new school year without helping our teachers. These devices were 8 and 10 years old. And so what I loved about that opportunity was Joel said, I want to be in the weeds. I want to stay with the team, because I thought he should have the job. And I said, well, that's perfect, because I don't want to be in the weeds. I want to be over with curriculum instruction and find out what are we going to be doing with these devices in our classrooms. And so it was a perfect match. And so our plan was first initially, what are we going to do with our XP devices? We have 5,000 of them. We have about 2,000 remaining. And the superintendent and school board said, we're going one-to-one. Didn't really know what it meant, but we're going one-to-one. They went to Mooresville, saw Dr. Edwards and Scott Smith, and they said, MacBooks, they're in the classroom, we want that. We're going digital. We hadn't had a curriculum adoption in over a decade. We're going online, all things in the cloud, ubiquitous learning. And I said, well, what's the budget? How are we going to do this? Do we have the infrastructure? And I looked at Joel, and Joe said, I'm out. He said, but I have a quote for almost 1,400 MacBooks. We're going to buy them for all the teachers, but we're a Windows shop. So the strategy first was to just get our head around where we currently were at the time, where were we going for the next 3 to 5 years, and then try to align. And we're still doing that. We always know where we're trying to go. We pick your Google map, and then are you going to run, you're going to walk, you're going to drive, what's your mode of transportation? And it's going to change. And so we're just trying to be agile and flexible. I call us the wingmen to instruction and learning. Pedagogy drives this. We're the support system. We're a service group. So we're just trying to do all things that we can to support teaching and learning. That's our strategy. And we'll get to devices and all that other stuff later.
So I'd say our strategy is still fairly emergent. We have a technology plan for public schools that expires essentially this year, driven by some previous administrative folks. What we're basically looking at is about 60,000 plus devices across the district: Windows, Mac, Chrome. We started this work about 3 years ago. We had really a significant technical debt backlog. Most of our equipment hadn't been purchased within the past 5 to 7 years. So we had the XP, we had the falling apart MacBooks in the hands of the teachers. First thing we did was a kind of a bold discretion of our chief information officer, put a Chromebook in the hands of every single teacher. That started to kind of alleviate the pressure of that individual device. We then started rolling out technology cards, actual like front of classroom AV plus computer, just to try and get compute and AV in the classroom. That was a significant disparity between the different buildings. That plan is actually completing this year. So then we're kind of at this point where we've ripped the Band-Aid off and we've healed the worst of the wound, but we need to figure out how to actually make this thing work long term. The last thing we want to do is have to solve this problem again in 5 years. So that's the strategy, and that's kind of where we're going to be focusing the conversation.
Real quick, just your thought on estimated useful life for teacher devices.
So for us, we're doing 3 years for a teacher device. For teacher mobile device, to clarify, coming from the desktop. You also have to look at price point. For us, we did not have a budget. As I mentioned, Joel said, we have to replace their devices. There was no budget. And kept getting asked every year to replace those devices. So I came in and said, what's our budget? What's our amount that we have to have for a teacher device? And then we said, well, what are we looking to do with it? Let's do the requirements first, and then we'll start looking at stuff. And so then I went to the CFO, our COO, and said, how long can we have this? What's our budget? We're going to build this in. We're going to lease. So we have the annual payment built into the budget. This is funded for us through general fund. No bond, there's no levy. So general fund. And so for us, we picked our price point, which I can share with you later, but I'm not going to tell you. It's pretty high, and I'm excited about that for our teachers. And it's going to be mobile, at least to last at least 3 years. We probably can get a little more out of it, but things are changing so quickly. We're Windows 10, we were XP, we did a few Windows 7 for our 21 elementary schools, but we leaped into Windows 10, and it's phenomenal. It's been bumpy, as everything is when you do an upgrade, but it will be phenomenal for our teachers. We, in the next 3 weeks, should be finished rolling out Surface Pro 3s to all of our secondary certs, and we have an order coming in very soon for Surface Pro 4s for all elementary certs. And so we'll have 2,000-ish Surface Pro devices for all staff, all cert staff. So pretty exciting. And then talk about students later.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. We're basically looking at it. The majority of this equipment has supply. So that's within about a 3-year timeline. Even when we're talking about laptops that traditionally have a 5 to 7 year life, we're really trying to model a total cost of ownership that speaks again to that 3-year life cycle for a lot of those same reasons.
Okay, so I think our next question is really about what were the factors, and you covered a little bit of that in your first thing, that led you to explore a leasing and refresh program. So I think you mentioned there, old equipment, what new technology is available, that kind of thing. So that's what we're looking at.
So a couple of years ago, as we were starting to kind of figure out how to tackle this problem, we started doing some real rough back of the envelope math. And between our platform, which is network, voice over IP phone, as well as just this device supply, we were looking at about a $30 million refresh. The majority of that equipment was 5 to 7 years old. That was not something we were going to be able to swallow out of our general fund. We had already issued a significant bond for seismic improvement in our schools that did not have a technology component. So we really didn't have a single unified funding strategy that we worked on. So that's where we started saying, okay, what can we do now, and how can we make this a consistent, sustainable spend? So instead of that $30 million peak, then nothing for a while, then another $30 million. how can we even this thing out so that we can predict the amount of money we're going to need, we can go lobby for that, work with our financial office, work with potentially a bond, to really make this thing work over time, so get out of the cyclical nature of it. That was really key for us.
Same story at Evergreen, the exact same story. And we had to actually sell it to the business office because we hadn't really done leasing at this scale before. So there was some apprehension, but we looked at other districts in the local area as well as nationally, and I partnered business office to begin that conversation so I could step away from the table and not make it about devices and make it about what's the best way for taxpayer dollars to be spent to keep this sustainable and reliable. If we're looking at pedagogy and we're saying everything's going to be accessed online, then we have to have tools to be able to do that. So you have to fund what you're trying to do. And so we approached it from that perspective, and well, here we are. So we're doing it. But it's a lot of hard work, a lot of research. You just have to find out what their requirements are and then try to meet those, and then bring your partners to the table. I think that's really important. And try not to be the messenger. You want to do that initially, set the prompt. If the district has the appetite, and if they do, then bring your partners in to help.
So, and we've gotten this question in a couple of other sessions that we've done, so that's kind of why we've added it, which is, what are the options for acquiring equipment that you consider? So, I think you guys have mentioned a bunch of them, but I just thought maybe we'd just go over, like, obviously there's general fund, but there's 10 other ways that you could pay for technology. So what are those ways that you explored, and then how did you come to say, okay, this is the leasing model, how does that accomplish, check all those boxes, right?
Well, I'll start. Okay. Well, the first thing we try to do is what's the number? Well, what are we going to do first? How do you eat one bite at a time? So we said, who needs to go first? And let's let that be the cycle. So when I joined, I mentioned 2 years ago, the first project we had was SBAC. How are we going to hit smarter balance and allow the students to do the online testing? We didn't have enough mobile devices. I mentioned 5,000 XP, so they couldn't go to the labs to do the test. And fortunately, Joel and the team have been doing a lot of research with mobile devices and testing. We quickly dialed into the device that worked for us, the Dell Chromebook. The price point was there. So we leased, I think, 3,700 devices for 3 years, knowing that we would be one-to-one. Didn't know what the student device was going to be, but at least this device would get us through SBAC, could be used for instruction while we figure out how we're shifting pedagogy. And it's worked out really well. That device will end, the lease will end in about 1.5 years. We'll have the option to buy it out or get rid of it and stick with our student devices. So that was the icebreaker for the conversation, and also the appetite for the district, and start looking at how are we going to fund this annually. And for us, it's about $5 million. And we're looking at classified and cert, and that's something we hadn't done before. We've given it to the department managers. You have to take care of your support staff. You have to take care of secretaries. And it's like, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. If we're doing things holistically and trying to look at this as an operation and an enterprise, we should be doing all things for all staff. And so that's what we're trying to tackle. I'm not saying we have all the answers and we've solved it. There certainly are challenges, but we're working through them.
Yeah, and for us, we did something fairly similar. We had kind of identified strategic bands of staff that were in a size that we could support with a rollout. We then kind of identified what technology they needed. Our most recent rollout was to our counselors that were in schools. We had actually added quite a few counselors this last year. Added a laptop, a docking station, a monitor for their position. We went with a lease on that. Other work we've done has been more general fund. We've had opportunities like with SBAC to kind of try to address that problem. And really, the way that we sold that was not addressing a testing issue. Some political issues trying to engage yourself to that level. It was more just talking about student to computer device ratio, which we were pushing at like a 1 to 5 level, just to try and have enough to kind of get through that year. That led to us doing a really significant piece of work to have roll out about 64 carts of the Dell Chromebooks configured about 35 per cart, multiple per school. At the same time that we did a whole inventory of the district to try and get our hands around a little bit more what the bands and what So it's been pretty emergent for us. We've kind of been handling it as we go through each of these strategic pieces. But one of the key components to that for us was really trying to look at the configuration rollout conversation. Because again, we're of such a size, we can't solve the whole problem all at once, and that then kind of leads you directly to making some of these smaller decisions.
I know one of the questions we've gotten is like, what do you do if you have, the PTA or somebody that wants to give you a grant or those kinds of things, and how does that mix in with what you're trying to accomplish from a refresh perspective?
I'll take that one. So there's donor choice. We had that. It still exists. But we began to tell the story of what we're going and how we're going to be serving students and meeting the needs. So Deputy Superintendent and I did town hall sessions. We did 6 of them last year to begin to tell the story of where we're going. Not one-to-one, personalized learning. Since this is about disruption, it's not about devices. And in telling the story, and we still have a lot of work to do in communication, but in telling that story, I then put myself out there to principals and said, if you need me to come have a conversation with your staff or the PTA, I'm here for you. So I started to do that. Been doing it about a year now, and we've been able to kind of curb some of those decisions that PTA want to buy 10 iPads or they want to buy toner for the USB printers. It's like, well, wait a minute, here's what we're doing globally. Could you direct that money to tutoring? Could you direct that money to paper, crayons? And so we're telling them where we're going and asking them, while we appreciate their donation, we really don't need it because this is what we're doing. These devices aren't tied to the network. And that has helped. Certainly hasn't stopped it. And it'll probably take us 2 years before we get there, but it certainly has decreased significantly, at least over the past 2 years. So communication.
My follow-up question to that is that since you have developed kind of that useful life and then the refresh plan, does that make that conversation, is that what you're presenting
It goes
to them?
away, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, it goes away. When they hear that the district is going to take care of it,
Right.
Part of it is trust now. It's taken time, and so, and I'm new, so is this really going to happen? Is it going to come to fruition? And so as we begin to tell the story, some marketing involved. You have to get your communications team involved. It's a campaign behind this whole thing. You have to get buy-in, not only from your board, it has to start there, but then from teachers, from staff, from community members. You have to have your talking points. So we're spinning up an entire website dedicated to our initiative. And currently it's called Link, Linking Individual Futures to Today. We're changing that to one by one. One building, one teacher, one student, one by one. And you won't hear anything about devices in that, even though that's everything because it's the access to the digital learning.
Yeah, and we're kind of in a very beginning stage for trying to engage those types of folks. We have a high school where they've developed, I think it's kind of a joint PTA and student venture to provide a Chromebook for every high school kid. So there's a lot of local control that happens in local schools are kind of on their own to figure some of this out. Some of them have very strong student and family supports that can really do that kind of work. Others simply don't, and we're having to kind of come in a little bit more aggressively to try and equalize that equation. One thing we have done is try to get in front of major donations and put a little bit more prescription around this is what the district is doing strategically. This is the structure, particularly in the Chromebook space, Chrome management. So as Chromebooks are donated, we're asking that the management licensing to be donated will be purchased. And that, that's ruffled some feathers. That's a real challenge where you have to try and start to establish that trust. And we're still very emerging in that, and being able to prove we can get that work done effectively.
One other thing I'd like to have, we have a foundation, and the foundation every year gave grants to the teachers. And the teachers would always buy technology. A big feather in our cap was when the foundation stopped giving the grants for technology because they saw where we were going. And so I think that helped, again, the trust when they saw what we were doing. And the money is still there, but it's just used in a different area. It's used for different things now. So at the end of the day, everything we do is, around communication and starting at the top, hopefully at your superintendent, cabinet level, and then we're just facilitating all things that they basically endorsed of where we're going and we're aligning to it. And that makes the conversation much easier. If you're pushing the rock uphill, be careful.
All right, so we discussed this a little bit, but I think we want to kind of touch on the points of the how does leasing make it sustainable? Like how does having, I mean, it's technology refresh, right? So you're building a technology refresh program. How does that make your budget sustainable? How does that help you? I'm going to start with you on that one, if that's okay.
So, you know, if you're really good down to brass tacks on it, your availability of a device is now a contract. That device goes away should that contract not be renewed. That is an effective conversation for some folks from just a tactical perspective. You know, when you start talking to your finance office about this kind of a strategy, it really is a conversation of issuing debt. You know, one way or another, you're going to have to come up with this money. And in all likelihood, you don't have it sitting in your general fund. Your foundation may not have enough to do the work broadly and with equity. So, you know, you pick your poison. You go for a bond and then have an expectation that that bond will then be renewed. Do you establish an acceptable level of issued debt? Do you lease that debt, or do you get it directly from the bank? That's all components of the conversation. And you know, as we kind of continue to pursue through this, there are value adds around the leasing program that directly affect how that total cost of ownership calculation works. That's something I spent a lot of time working on with our finance office, because it's not obvious. I mean, you're just looking at the points paid on a debt instrument, but that's the exact conversation we would have to have.
Yeah, we did a lot of work on that.
Yes.
we did a lot of work on that, really looking at what the costs are, how they affect it, what the useful life of the equipment is, how we're matching that, and then showing that actually there's a significant savings. So we did a lot. We did math. We did math.
Lots of disagreements about how math works, which for the school district is fun.
But we did math, and there is a definite number that we can point to, that there's not only a savings, but that you're meeting what the life of that equipment is. So essentially, you're using that equipment for the life, and then you're refreshing it. And that's as opposed to, I'm going to have this equipment until it dies, which I think almost everybody in this room probably has had equipment, or maybe still has equipment.
Still has.
Right? So it is a little bit about the math, a little bit about trying to, I think what you said is just making it so that you can figure out where to pull that from, and that it's consistent every year. Do you have anything to add?
Couldn't have said it any better.
Okay, just want to check. A couple things on this one specifically is out of warranty maintenance costs. I don't know if you want to go over that. You talked about avoiding spikes. Anything about like kind of realigning the roles? I think that's a big one for you, Derek. Is that okay? I can get away from break fix. So do you want to mention that a little bit?
I'd be careful, Joel's
Well, he's going to do other really great big things.
Well, I'll just talk culture for a minute. And I know we're talking leasing, but I just want to be transparent.
No, I think it's perfect.
Because we all face this. We're a Dell shop, and we work on our own equipment. And so you have to have common for a union shop as well. So I didn't want to ruffle any feathers by taking work away, but I also have to do what makes sense, because we're shifting. Here we are with desktops, and then we don't have enough for students, and we're going to go to scale of 20,000 mobile devices. How am I going to do that with my team of 14 techs? You're not successfully. So we started peeling the onion back, looking at how are we going to do this. Well, with these devices, whether it's a Surface Pro or any inking device, you can't crack the top, most of them. That's changing a bit now with some of the OEMs. And since we're a Dell shop, or HP, or Lenovo, take your pick, you can become certified and you can crack the top. So you kind of get the best of both worlds depending on which device you choose. I wanted a hybrid model. I think we needed a hybrid model. I don't want to lose the skill set that the team has. I want to try to keep everybody happy, but at the end of the day, it was speed. How quickly, when a device goes down, can we get another one back in the hands of the student? I don't want to have to send it off and have someone fix it. I need my guys to be able to fix it. Can't do any better than if you handle it at home. So it's the best of both worlds. I think it's, depending on the device we pick, we're narrowing it down. We're doing our evaluation now. We're going to pick in June. But we want the best of both worlds. So I keep looking at Joel, making sure he'll keep me honest here. But it was a culture conversation. And I even had to go to the union a couple of times to explain to them, and I should have done it at the beginning, I'm sharing this with you now, so if you're gonna do this, have those unique conversations up front. Don't do it after the fact like I did. But let them know what you're doing, where you're going, and how this might impact staff. Because people will get their feathers ruffled, because you're taking work away. And what you're really trying to do is not take work away, you're trying to do it to the best interest of the school district. Once people see that, where work is going to shift, and then also changing roles and responsibilities. It's one of the things that Joel and I are working on. We need to start with management. Where are we? Where are we going? And then start looking at maybe even tier positions. We have classified, we have techs, but they've been in that role. There's nowhere for them to go. Let's start looking at having tiers 1, 2, and 3, whatever you want to call them, to create career paths and also skill level based on that piece of where we're going. Because if we are truly looking at break, fix, and doing these things, not everyone can fix it in the building. It might have to come back to a level 3 that somebody has a different level of experience. So
It's a realignment.
It's realignment. It's a realignment of the entire enterprise, from not only the support side, but also on the system side and how it is all integrated. It's our ecosystem. And if you're going digital, all things have to talk. And most importantly, assist. But anyway, I'll go squirrel on you really quickly. You know we can suck the life out of a room. So, sorry.
You're not. So just specifically, what qualities in a refresh partner were you looking for? And so I know Ryan, both of you have had experience with lots of other companies, and Ryan, I think you really searched for like a year-ish for. So you want to talk about kind of what were you looking for? What kinds of things were important to you?
Well, to kind of jump off the culture, there's kind of a broken window effect where if you have staff doing nothing but CPR on 7-year-old equipment, trying to take wireless steel pieces of RAM, there's a completely different mindset in the team. The way they represent their support to staff is completely different. The way that staff look at their equipment and whether they can depend on it to function is completely different. So, when I started the process, I started looking at how do we get the dollars, right? Can I tell this story from all the different perspectives for how we get the money in the door of the door? When we rolled out our Chromebooks, we did not do that on a lease. We did that as a direct purchase. We brought in student interns. We had summer handout events. It was an extremely labor-intensive process. It's the physicality of taking a device out of a OEM box, validating that it's not dead on arrival, preparing it, asset tagging it, and then getting it in the hands of the people that actually need it. It's onerous on the people that just get the device. So I think we kind of made the not necessarily conscious decision, but we just didn't want to do that again. So when we were out looking, one of the first groups that I was looking at was GE Cap, and they'll give you the funds, and they'll give you a certain degree of aftermarket or afterlife support. They're no longer a functioning organization for this sort of work. They were purchased by Wells Fargo about in the middle of this process. Was kind of looking at the total cost of ownership of doing that. If we can get our hands around the money, do we then pay for all of that labor? And then do we have to consider that as part of our 3-year total cost of ownership program? And that just becomes completely unwieldy. I mean, you need a whole department within your IT department to just manage moving stuff around. And we were talking about 80+ schools, potentially 60,000 pieces of equipment at some point. That's not possible. It costs more than the device to get it in people's hands. So the idea of facilitating the process of refresh, both at the in point bringing in a piece of equipment so that it's ready for the user the moment you take possession of it, and then when it's time to actually hand that device back and get a new one, it's all encapsulated in both the funding model and in the process or the service. That's a huge value add for this kind of a program. So when you're talking to the conversations that we were having with our finance units, when they're looking at the number, the raw cost, you've really got to break that out and think hard about how your organization can actually facilitate all of that life cycle, not just the celebratory moment of getting the device, but that moment of taking the device back and giving someone a new one. And that calculation isn't that difficult, but it's pretty startling when you start to break it down.
Okay. Some things that were important to you.
It's changed over the last couple of years for us, for the positive. When we started, it's the same things that Ryan and Porter Public have faced. What we're going to do with it when we get it, how quickly can we get it out the door, especially for us because we were leapfrogging in operating systems. So we were banking that it would come out when we said it would, and then we had an engineer that could build the image for us, and the timelines got shifted. You know, life happens. So then expectations on that, and the Christmas gifts aren't delivered in time. So you have that, and when it gets taken out of the sales, you know. So one thing that we're learning through all of this is partnerships. I'm looking at CDWG specifically because they're one of our main partners. You have to pick your partners, and you already either have them or you're having the conversations, but know who you're marrying, and stick with them, for better or for worse. At least until you get to a point where you can't do it anymore. But your partnerships are going to be your lifeline because we cannot do this alone. Ryan mentioned it, but that's the one thing that my team, I think I've had to sell to them because we were so used to doing it on our own. And most of the reason that we did it on our own is there's no funding. We had to do it on our own. But now that funding is it has become available, we now need to say it's not only for PD, it's not only for devices, it's for training, it's for all things that are going to make this happen. And again, students in this sense, why are we doing this? And so I mentioned it before, it's a complete overhaul of our educational system, this initiative, but the partners and the partnerships help get there. From the leasing perspective, I'm not going to mention who we looked at, but we had to move quickly. I told you that this started with the board and the superintendent, and our timeline was firm. And so I did not, unfortunately, have a lot of time to go out and research, but I didn't want to go to the GE capitals of the world because they're not sustainable. So I needed to pick a partner, or wanted to pick a partner for the district that this is their business. This is all they do. And so, and not only just devices, but other equipment, because we're in the process now of managed print services. And so I needed someone that we could work with that had no ties directly to an OEM and was agnostic, if you would. So that was extremely important to us. And then we have a partner for e-waste or recycling. But when I met with them a couple of years ago, they didn't have certificates. So that still frightens me to this day. I know that they wipe them, at least I trust and believe that they wipe their devices. But as we're now putting in all of this obsolete equipment, I need from them that certificate that, you know, something's not going to pop up in the Willamette somewhere that has Evergreen Public Schools on the asset tag. But through this partnership, the data destruction is used, and that's a piece of it. T's and C's and all those things can be changed and modified to meet not only your requirements as an IT shop, but of your community and of your school board. And I encourage you to ask your stakeholders, and if you haven't had the conversation, what do they expect? Because as you start rolling this out, if you haven't asked the questions, they're going to ask you. So we certainly won't have all of the answers, but by involving stakeholders in the conversation, it helps.
So I think I think it's an important point, and actually both of you really looked at that. Like, okay, we're looking at the beginning cycle, but we also have to look at all, like, what's going to happen at the end. And so I think it's a very valid point to be talking about. Let's not just look at what gets us the equipment. Let's look at the whole entire life cycle. Let's look at how we can refresh, but let's look at what happens in 3 years or 4 years when we do refresh. What has to happen from a data destruction perspective? All of those pieces are really important in the puzzle of trying to build a model that is sustainable.
One other element that helped us as part of value, you can't put a cost to it, is that it's a benefit, but swaps. Things are going to fail, things are going to break. Well, at the end of the lease, if you had 10,000 devices and 75% of them are working, what about the other 25%? Do you have to pay for those? So that became part of the conversation too. As hot swaps, what does that look like? So working with Insight helped us be able to answer that question, and also not have to figure out some of the other leasing models that require same serial number, same. You're locked in. What are you going to do at the end of your lease when you have to turn in equipment and 25% of it is broken or is failed? Insight was able to help us answer those questions.
Yeah, that's actually a really important point. You're thinking about doing this type of an operation outside of K-12, but you end up with kind of, if you're not careful, you end up with a bone jar, full of equipment. You're going to have to return in 3 or 5 years. It's broken, but they need the serial, they need the same device. You're ending up purchasing a significantly larger amount of equipment than you would have originally, just with the expectation that that equipment will fail. And then you're sitting on the warranty for that equipment over the course of that time. So when you do this math, all of those pieces need to be a part of your equation to understand what the end term, which is actually, for some of these types of arrangements, that can be a really serious piece of the financial contract, is understanding what your payment's actually going to look at the end. Because the one thing you're probably not going to get away with for very long is selling this as a sustainable spend, and then 3 years down the road coming back to your CFO or your budget office and saying, okay, I also need 30% more because all this stuff broke and we didn't have a plan for X, Y, and Z. So really dial that in when you're doing calculations.
Anything else on this one? Okay, so this is the really fun one, which is who are all the people that you had to talk to? How did you gain support? I'm going to let Ryan start with that one because it was less work for you because you already kind of had buy-in, and actually your COO was really on board with the idea. You had a lot of work to do to try to get a lot of people together to say that this was a good idea. So
yeah, I mean, it's different organizations can be bureaucratic behemoths, less or more so. For us, it was something that I think some other departments had tried and had not been successful with. So there was already kind of a counterculture to this type of a financial instrument. It took a lot of lobbying. I mean, the stakeholders that I was going after wasn't so much, buy-in from the union, buy-in from the cultural or the strategic vision of the district. It was really, go spend your time up in the budget office, spend your time with your CFO and their directs, help them understand what you're trying to do. And for us, it came down to being all about the numbers. We have some folks that are very, very particular about double and triple checking the way that we're spending the taxpayers' dollar, and really building that, being able to justify that in their own language. So you have to do a little bit of additional work there. I was lucky. I have a little bit of background in finance. Both my parents are accountants, so I was able to kind of speak a common language. If you need help, reach out and find some folks that can help you build that bridge. I mean, you spent quite a bit of time with them. This is not these types of financial instruments are not necessarily germane to some of the folks that are responsible for managing your budgets. So, when they're looking at a particular interest rate factor, it's not just a flat, bank loan.
right.
So you have to help explain to them how, asset depreciation doesn't necessarily calculate in on a product like this. So if I'm going to hold on to a laptop for 3 years, they're going to say your book value for that laptop should be 5 years. So from their perspective, you're losing, asset depreciation, depreciated value in those end of 2 years. So the way that we kind of cracked that was putting a 5-year total cost of ownership around, holding onto that piece of equipment until it literally just drops dead. The staff, replacement parts, return to manufacturers, maintaining hot swaps, potential downtime and redelivery. They had to kind of come to our side a little bit and understand the logistics of running an IT department. And all that was just constant conversations. I would say you and I probably spent somewhere between 8 and 16 hours just in meetings with folks explaining this stuff.
It's not that hard for everybody, though, just so you know. He's the hardest.
It shouldn't be that difficult, but it's about a partnership. It's unlikely you're going to be able to deliver an executive summary of this and have somebody sign off on it. It really is about getting everybody to the table and kind of crossing those silos to understand what the best operational perspective of the district is from a financial and a tactical perspective.
I think the interesting thing about engaging the finance people and working with them is that they all completely understand that this equipment has a short useful life. Even though most of them would probably like to keep their computer for 10 years because they've got all their spreadsheets on it, they understand that the device has a short useful life and that this is a way to be able to help manage that. So you just have to have that conversation with them, and I help with those conversations. But and then also they want to see the math, and the math does work. I mean, it completely works. So you can show them, this is how we do it. This is how we can help keep current equipment in the district. And that, I think, is a goal that most of you in this room want to have, so that you're not having 5,000 XP machines, you're not having that older equipment, you're having the best technology that you can support from an educational perspective. So, you know, there's a bunch of conversations you have to have. I mean, Derek talked about the community. I mean, like going out to the community and saying, this is how we're doing that. I think that all of those pieces are you know, you're going to have to gain some support, but it is pretty easily gained when the math makes sense, when the idea of having current technology makes sense to everybody. So we're going to take questions from you guys now. So, yes.
You're talking about funding of these programs.
Well, so, I mean, our company does that. I mean, we're a technology.
You mean, how does the district pay for it?
Right. So, a variety of different places. Right. We have done a lot. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
The answer is yes.
Whatever works for you
yes.
is what works best.
So I can give you an example of another district that does have a tech levy, and then a concern from their finance people was like, well, what happens if the levy doesn't get approved again, right? And so the idea is that the leasing program allows it to be a very small percentage of general fund. So, and the idea is if I have 15,000 students, all who have devices, and the tech levy for some reason doesn't get approved again, I'm then only going for 1% of the general fund for my payment for that particular year to keep the technology in the kids' hands. So that's one, you know, so general fund, tech levy works phenomenal. You can really use a lot of different sources for those. So that's, but then you're only looking at the, you know, that payment for that particular year, right? So depends on what you're signing up for in terms of the length of the term, but you have 3 annual payments or 4 annual payments depending on how it works. So we're building around what works for your district.
The heart of it is really to think about what you can do with those 3 to 5 years. If you've got a very significant problem to solve, like you've got a one-to-one initiative that is you know, board approved and moving forward, and you've got a chunk of money to get something started, talk about trying to amortize that money over time. So instead of taking, you know, a large body of capital and just investing it directly, try to hold that capital over the course of the lease. So for one of our pilots for the counselors, we were given the money to just say, hey, go refresh counselors. Because we've added a bunch of counselors, they have the oldest equipment, that's fine, go do it. And we just structured that such that we're basically holding those funds in reserve year over year to make the payments on that pilot. Now obviously at the close of that year, we're going to have to, at the close of that leasing schedule, we need to have a conversation about how we can sustain this. But as you layer these schedules up, you know, it's a small initial buy-in, small initial payments, depending on how you kind of segment your technology refresh. It has that old, you know, classic, you know, when you're cooking crab, you just kind of turn the heat on and the water gradually rises and they don't really notice. It kind of has that effect on the general fund. You walk in the door. I gotta get a cooking analogy in here someday.
That was awesome.
You know, you walk in the door to your budget office and you say, I need $30 million. They're gonna, you know, laugh you out the door. But if you're gonna say, we need to figure out a way to have a couple of million every year, year over year, you find that. Right? I mean, they can find some way to make that investment.
Both of you talked about pulling dollars from different places. Have you been able to pull those disparate monies that have been used for technology purchases and pull that back towards the bigger pool for the district purchase and recoup those dollars? I think that's key to making that work across the board.
A little. So it started, for example, principals. Our buildings have quite a bit of money to do things with. And I mentioned budget holders had money to spend on operational things, but they weren't doing it. They were spending it in other areas. So the COO and I sat down and said, we're going to have to pull some of this back in to help fund it. Had a conversation with the principals and said, okay, we're going to take care of this for you. We're going to need some money back. So you have the option either to go in or your staff are going to begin to look at you because everyone else is taken care of and you're not. It's been an easy conversation. So we pulled some funds back in. Our general fund is taking care of this. I have to pinch myself because I still can't believe that we're able, and I don't know how long we're going to be able to do this, but for right now, the next 3-4 years, we have general fund taking care of us. I don't know if I'll say that.
Decentralized purchasing. You have decentralized purchasing, like each building can purchase what they want. Or
They can to a reason. or to a point. So they have very small budgets. They can buy stuff. They need keyboards, mice. What we've whittled down very quickly is our purchasing list. You know, we had desktops, monitors, printers, you know, anything that they needed. We've now pretty much shut that down and said we're going to be taking care of that for you. So the things that they buy now are really just specific to the school and they're for administrative tasks or peripherals.
That's a really good question. I mean, we struggle with that. We're very decentralized. We've increased consolidated budgets in schools, and at the same time decreased the consistent funding of technology correct? Which, you know, it's, when you're in the midst of a recession, you want to focus on teachers, classroom, and student service. You know, it's probably not politically viable for us to just reach back in and claw those funds back in a coordinated effort. You know, one thing that I've been kind of theorizing on, if anybody has done this, please share, is the idea of a requisitions model, where you're making those purchases and then you're billing back. So you go and you actually say, this year we're refreshing X, you establish that as some sort of a contractual lease, and then as you distribute that equipment to staff, you distribute it on kind of a per staff member model, billing those central funds. So rather than changing the perception of who's holding the purchasing authority, you're providing just a little bit more direction and a little bit of a back-end facilitated transaction to get the piece of equipment. Because what you don't want to do is continue doing that. You know, you lose that economy of scale where it's just a one-off here and a one-off here. That may still kind of happen where it's one per building, but if you can do all 200 staff members you know across the district in one major purchase, you have a much better efficiency.
So we've done some models where we're looking at, you know, monies that do come every year, right? So it's like money that you know you're going to get every year, and then work backward to what does that get you, right? You know, obviously you can't use it 100% for devices, but you can say, okay, I know I get this much, and then work backwards and do a 3 or 4 year plan, and that could, you know, help you with that. So
Yeah, I think what I find is I see people that want to buy their own equipment up front, but then when the refresh program comes around, they want
Right.
to jump on board with that.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's no money in there originally to make that original purchase,
Yes.
so now you have to have extra money to keep bumping that up for those one-offs that weren't included originally when you were budgeting up front for all this. That'll happen forever through the life cycle of all of it, right?
It will. And there's another approach you can take there which has to do with kind of buying windows. So if you don't execute the purchases as they come in from the consolidated budgets of the schools, but instead you say, you know, we're going to place an order once per quarter, and then you try to build that into the leasing schedule. If you're the right size in terms of purchasing volume, that can work.
So you can have multiple leases off schedule, that's to your benefit.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely.
It can get a little complicated.
Sure, absolutely.
So, the numbers I heard in terms of looking at, you know, projections has been, you know, 3-year lifespan and talking about looking at that 3 years. Did you have conversations with your business units in terms of the longer, much longer range planning, like looking out 10 years? Do they feel that this is sustainable for going, say, through 3 more cycles?
Great question, and for us, yes. I'm new, so I mean, I keep saying that 2 years. I guess I can't say that anymore. But yes, I mean that's the conversation we had with the board. I remember the first workshop we had in 13. I said, "Is this sustainable? Is this real?" And the board said yes. I mean, they approved the budget, and so far we know what our line item is, and they say yes. I have to trust that it's there. Now. Truth be told, and I got to be very transparent, when we were in the recession, we had a big cut. We had to cut $26.5 million out of the budget. Superintendent Dieter said, we're going to keep teachers in the classrooms, so classified took the hit. When we started coming back from the recession, we didn't fill those positions, many of those positions. And if you look through the state of Washington, there's an FTE threshold. We are way below that. So we put that money away, and our COO invested it wisely. We are an anomaly, I would say. I can't tell you many districts that are able to do this at our size with general fund. So we're very, very, very fortunate. I work with so many amazing people that are much smarter than I am.
I want to discuss that whole idea of matching the useful life, right? So you have 3 years, you have 4 years, 5 years. 5 years is a little long for all the stuff that we're talking about. But what happens at the end of the lease, and again, this is a little bit about picking a partner, but is that you don't have to make one decision for all. So if something changes, which things change,
Yep.
and you need to extend for 1 year, or you need to give
Bargaining.
half of them back, and you need to keep half of them because you're not ready, you have the ability to be able to do that. So, that is a really important piece of the contracts and how building it's sustainable is working with a partner that's going to let you do some of those things where you don't have to make one decision at the end of 3 or 4 years. Very, very important, and I think does help to build the sustainability of it. So that's a thought.
And the other piece of this, it all depends on what your why is. Why are you doing this? We're just doing it because you have to have devices for people to do their jobs. But if it's for access, it's a whole different conversation. You have to have it because if that's where the digital resources are, that's how kids learn because they're in their books. Well then, what's your alternative? So it all depends. You can really turn the conversation around.
Yeah, because the question I'm getting from the instructional side is, yes, this is the way we want to go. I totally want to support that.
Yeah.
But I got to make sure that we
We
can
can fund
fund
it.
the business side.
Right.
Because you
Yeah.
make that shift in the way that learning is happening. The last thing you want to do is make that shift and then say, oh, now the tools aren't available.
Right.
And I think that's that example that I was saying. Is like so a district that we had that funded out of levy, right? And then that was the business office concern, like what happens, right? Well, my payment is only 1% of the general fund, so I can go back and get that, right? No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
This sounds like a great plan to me, and my struggle has been with finance and get into see the life behind this. And I wonder how many, do you think your business managers ever make them sit in a classroom and actually understand what we do in education? They really, and I say that maybe facetiously, but I really sometimes think they don't really understand who they work for. And my position is trying to convince them that what we're asking to do is driven, and I like the way you started with it, it's driven by pedagogy, it's by what we're doing in the classroom, how your job, and I guess my question is, how much power do these finance people have in your district when it comes to stuff like this? Because mine has nothing in terms of making decisions on how things work in the district, as opposed to the principals, administrators, superintendent, the people that are the education experts have to sort of succumb to the finance. And I think that needs to be switched around. So if you don't have the funding, your job is to get more funding. You've got this revenue thing that you're dealing with. Well, if the expenditures exceed the revenues, maybe your job is to get more revenue. But how do you approach that piece of convincing? Because my finance guy will lease a copier every year.
It's the same.
And it's the same,
It's the
yeah.
same.
He wants to only buy enough. But he also drives a 12-year-old car because he's still making money. I mean, it's his way of doing business.
That's
and
not
so
the same.
that is curious because I know that's a big part of how you make this work. You have to convince the CFO that there is capacity to make this work. And I don't know if you have any.
Ryan, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, it's partnership. They have a very specific role in the organization. They're going to be watchdogs, rightfully so. The funding of the district. They understand if a program like this kind of goes off the wheels, it does affect the educational side. And it ends up being a risk for them. They're taking on a lot of risk by engaging in this contract. If they're not able to renew it, then yeah, they're going to have their decision is going to directly impact the classroom, which is maybe an uncomfortable space for some. When we started the conversation, it was literally all about the industry, and that was the focus. What we had to do is sit down and I had to teach them to be technologists, basically. And say, okay, let's walk through 5 years in the life of a piece of equipment in the district and bring that back to us, bring that back to the actual development sense. But talk them through it, because for us it was very tactical. We're not as tied to the pedagogical piece in our program just yet. identified as some of our biggest pain points, which is the kind of tactical staff equipment and equipment in the house. We'd like to get there, and we're just not in a space where we're really focusing the educational side of the house on the technology in terms of curriculum adoption. We're starting. But you know, we had a problem to solve. And again, it was we've got a $30 million problem to solve. Let's find a way to partner on getting that resolved. So how did that conversation go for you?
Well, because it was about pedagogy, it made it simple for us. But at the same time, the superintendent's driving this, and the COO, CFO is the right hand. Whenever we talk money, he's in every conversation. So whether it's a principal meeting, he hired me. So there was a recruiter involved. They went to a headhunter, and there were, I'm sure, lots of people that applied for this position, and I was fortunate that my number was drawn. But relationships, you have to build a relationship with that person because they carry the purse strings for everything. And you have to try to get them to understand. And if that means grabbing lunch and taking them out to a building, then grab lunch and take them out to a building, or grab a beer, whatever it takes, because they're going to be your best friend or your worst nightmare.
I have personally met all of the finance people in both of these districts and many other districts, and multiple times. It's a change in thinking. It's definitely a change in thinking, and I can speak their language because that is who I talk to all the time. Right? I talk to IT and finance all the time, and so I completely understand what they're trying to accomplish as well. And so we'll spend the time to try to do, some education and how this can help.
And also building relationships. I'm sorry. One of the things that might help, and I did this initially, I've been working with the business manager in accounting and purchasing before I went to the COO, was I found out who his friends were. And then I found out who he worked with in other districts. And then I tried to find out, I had a puzzle. I had to connect the dots and put the pieces of the puzzle together and find out who was doing what I'm trying to do and how can I get them to talk so that I wasn't the messenger. Sometimes you're not a prophet in your own land. And so you have to do that.
Eric, you want to go?
Yeah, well, one thought to the gentleman back there is, it's also important though that the educators understand that just getting to that ratio of 1-to-1 doesn't necessarily mean that education will be complete, right? So rolling out the waves and failing small is often going to be not only more successful, but a much smaller check to cut on a year-to-year basis if you're doing it anyways. But then the other thing that I think of a lot is that if any private company were failing to make a profit, no business executive in their right mind would recommend, let's give everybody new computers, let's upgrade our hardware and software, let's upgrade our infrastructure and our data centers, but change nothing else in our business plan and expect to start making a profit. But in a lot of ways, that's the same rationale that schools are using to purchase technology. So when you're talking about funding and sustaining technology initiatives, not only is there the hardware part of it, but there's the professional development that goes into it, like Derek's been talking about for pedagogy. So how do you factor in then also the funding of the professional development? Because if all we do is add a layer of technologies to the classroom, but we don't help teachers to change the way that they're teaching, the technology is not going to matter. So it's a much bigger funding issue than most schools realize. And so far, we've only talked about funding and technology. So how do you guys kind of overcome or tackle that issue of funding and professional development?
So I'll take that one. It's loaded there. So I'll go back to the partnership with the COO, and I sat down and I said, "What's our budget?" I think when I joined, and Joel, correct me if I'm wrong, we had about $2 million. And we said, "What's this going to take?" And we said, "It's probably take 10 to 12 million." Can we do 10 to 12 million? So I said, "What kind of PD are we delivering today? How are we doing it?" We don't really have a PD shop. We have ed tech, and then unfortunately, ed tech's is part of our team. But how is PD delivered? And it's all over the place. So we started looking at, can we get days? We have 3 days now dedicated to what we're trying to do. And this personalized learning and this shift and transformation of teaching and learning. And we went to partners, and we brought them into cabinet meetings. I'm not going to mention any names, but we looked at a ton. And how are they going to help us? Because we knew what we wanted, but we didn't want someone to come in with their playbook. We're unique. We're evergreen. We're the Northwest, Wild Wild West. We're going to do our own thing. We need someone to come in and give us some ideas and kind of a la carte, pick for our teachers, and then we want to change it over the course of time. And so in this journey, I talked about Google Maps and mapping. Here's where we want to go. And sometimes we're going to walk, sometimes we're going to run, sometimes we want mass transit. And we need someone that's going to be flexible with us. And so we partnered with a company, ALP, and I'm going to give them a plug. Amos Fodchuk from Advanced Learning Partnerships came in, former teacher, nationally certified college, HQT. And Amos had worked with big school districts, Henrico County Public Schools, Baltimore County Public Schools, Clear Creek. We're talking, a couple hundred HISD, big districts and small districts. And Amos came in and listened. Out of the half dozen people that we had brought in front of cabinet, he came in and listened. And that's what my superintendent wanted. Somebody to come in so he could tell the story and they could just shut up and not come in and tell all the stuff that they had done. And he didn't want to hear that. And frankly, we didn't either. And so we told our story because we believe it is unique. We've been around a bunch of districts and we said, this is where we are. We're a small group, we're a workshop. We're invested in it. We've been doing it for 8 years. We're already in small groups. We haven't had a textbook adoption. We now have money. We want to invest in digital resources, ubiquitous learning. It's about access. We need this for our kids. We need it for our community. How can you help us get there? We know teachers need training. What does that look like? How do we even begin to scratch the surface of doing that? And Amos then began to tell the story of how he had done this great work in many other school districts. And then he sat back and said, I'm going to give you some references, call these school districts, and let them tell you how we help them. And here we are, a year and a half into the work. We have innovation centers, they're schools, kind of off of Microsoft's model of showcase school districts. These innovation schools, there are 7 of them. And in these schools, we have selected teachers within the PLC. And we have 6 to 9 teachers within these 7 schools, so it's not the entire school, it's 6 to 9 teachers within the school. And this is where we're going to go deep really fast with all things, devices, our learning management system, curriculum that we're piloting, and we're really going to kind of grow and see where this thing goes with the PD and then scale from there. So far it's working. We had the first light bulb go off last week. I was in a high school with teachers. We don't have our student devices yet. We haven't even picked the device. And the teacher was kind of, one of the teachers was confused. And she's like, well, I don't know why I'm here. We don't have our devices. And Amos said, this isn't about the device, it's about instruction. And he gave them 2 or 3 kind of pearls and said, this is what we're going to work on today. And then they went back and did that and we modeled and we watched and we observed. And they came back at the end of the day and she said, I thought I was going to have to change, everything that I've been doing in the classroom for 25 years. I didn't realize that this connects to everything that we've already done. And so that was a huge win for us. We're using swivels, as you see there. We're going to be videoing, and it's going to get some teachers uncomfortable, but that's why we got these innovation centers, and we're going to allow people to get muddy and get dirty and do the work and show their peers that we're going to fail and give them permission to fail, which is really hard for teachers because they're the expert, they're the center of the room. And so it's really shifting all of those things, and so the PD is huge, and we started with our administrators because they need to lead, and then from there we drop down to the teachers, and so we're getting, I can talk to you about that, the PD is everything.
I want to
We gotta
address just
invest
like
in it.
money, right, because it's money, right? So if you have $1 million a year, right, and you're going to lease your devices, you can do $700,000 lease payment and hold back $300,000 for professional development. And I would tell you that 9 out of 10 of the districts that we've been working with, that's what it is. It frees up that money because they can get so much more for the, for $1 million. $700,000 of annual payment, they have about $300,000 left over for PD. And I would say that in multiple of the large scale leases that we've done where there's been kind of a big bang of 6,000 devices, 10,000 devices, that leasing allows you to free up some of that money because there's no question that you're correct that the PD is really important, but it gives you those funds that you're going to have, you work backwards to the lease payment and then having the money for PD.
I have to give a plug to Dell. Sean's in the room. I mean, we found Amos because of a partnership with Dell. So you would be amazed when you ask the questions with your vendors who you work with, what you need, just ask. I mean, we're where we are because of our partnerships. And it's just absolutely amazing. And we're only funding this because of these using state contract. It's just not this does not have to go out to bid and RFP. If you utilize big contract and get really creative and Insight helps with that. So we're buying Dell days, and which is allowing us to buy the contract through that. The next step will be how do we lease it, because it's got to be sustainable. We need to invest about $1 million a year in this effort for our 1,800 certified teachers, and that's what we're going. We're about 600 right now.
What I think one thing that's important of what you were saying though is that the way that you phrase it is we need $1 million, and you don't say we need $700,000 for devices and $300,000 for PD, because the school board's going to say $300,000 for PD.
Right.
Oh no, we can't do that. Just buy the devices. But if you say, well, it's $250 per device and an extra $50 per device,
That's it.
bundled in for the PD, and then together we really need $300, and it comes out to $1 million. That's a much easier pill to swallow, and you don't have to try to explain the importance of PD to a plumber, a doctor, a lawyer, a nurse on your school board who don't really get the big scheme.
Just really quickly, there's another way to look at that when you're selling these types of programs is lowering the total ownership cost as we organize your data center. So one of the things we're working on right now is saying, okay, switching refresh, edge route, switch device, even our VoIP infrastructure, if we can get that onto a finance leasing program. If I've got 1.2 million in Cisco licensing that I need to do this year, and you've got a $1.5 million curriculum adoption, and you want to do both, and I can show up and say, hey, with this kind of a financial vehicle, it's really only going to cost you $200,000.
Yep.
And the rest can be freed up to do different work.
Yep.
That has worked as well, rather than kind of bundling the whole thing together, but really saying, look, we as a district have a budget this big, I need to only take this much of it. So I'm going to not necessarily give it back, because that's a scary proposition, but I'm going to structure the way that we make it spend so that we have more food.
Okay, so you guys, I know we have a question. You have a question back there, yeah. I think we have time for one more question or two more questions.
My question, I got here late, so I gotta miss some of this already. Our district is maybe in the Chromebooks. Is this a good launch for the working with Chromebooks all over?
Yes.
Anything.
Exceptional.
Yeah, absolutely.
Chromebooks in particular.
Especially for the price point.
I had a book though, but I haven't
Yeah.
been there yet though.
Any equipment. Any equipment.
But I'm upstairs, so please come talk to me. I mean, I'm here the whole time, so please come chat with me. So, and it's Derek Brown, Ryan Morales, and I'm Colleen O'Donnell with Insight. So, thanks, guys.
Good stuff, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good job.
You got a great story.
I'm just really blessed. Yes. I mean, I pinch myself. Well, I had to leave. I've never a property in your own land. I mean, Nick was just back at this city with a special day for Christmas. Thank you, because he's like, there's never a beast. He said, if you want to do this, you really might have to do this. All right, Nick, I'm done.
Hi, how are you? He's not. No, he's our IC. Yeah, he's not here today, but yeah, he's with our. That'd be great. That'd be great. I love it. Upstairs. Thank you so much. Awesome. Yeah, that'd be great. Great. Thanks so much. Thanks.
We got the money, now we're
That was big for me. I came to us.
So anyway, that's part of what our kids try to do.
Good to see you. Nice job, Derek.
Thanks for coming, Josh.
Nice job.
Okay, thanks. You thought that was okay?
No, it was fun. I like that you guys, that you kept the slides really minimalist, so it was more of a conversation,
Yeah, well, that's
as
what we
opposed to
want.
having a lot of, stuff for people to stare at.
I don't think that's.
I mean, it depends on the presentation, but this.
I mean, we're not talking about, we're not talking about bits and bytes and things that you can drop.
But you could have. I mean, you could have gone into financial models and, different things. You could have gotten it, made it really complicated, and not focused on the value proposition. But the way you did it, I thought was really made it really accessible.
Yeah, we're working on this process because we've done a couple of these, and we did RTM.
Yep.
I mean, and it seems like it's good, and it's pretty. We're getting a lot of really good questions
Yeah, I mean,
too.
it's very full.
I mean, I know, super.
People are
excited about
totally
that.
interested in it. They
I
just,
know.
there's just so many little
It's such a
barriers.
process. Well, it is. Well, you just have to work through it. I mean, you have to take the time to, to work through it. And it's like, we know that yes, it's a process. It's a process that's going to continue to focus over time. But I'm confident it's the right solution. I'm confident we're the right partner. I feel like we're making inroads, and then it's just
One of the things that I felt, I mean, it came out a little bit in this discussion, but I think you could have hit it harder, is that most of us lease copyright, right? And it's like, and if you can just draw that line for people, it's like, oh, you're already doing it. It makes it a lot less scary. Yeah, so cool. Hey, how's it going? Good.
Monica and I, Taylor will be here in about an hour and a half. She did, after. There talking.
Hey, Ryan. Let's get a picture of you guys really quick.
Okay. No, yesterday we were there for about a half an hour, very brief. Because it seems like maybe the spectrum is not.
Oh, that would be great.
Sure, apples, oranges, and bananas maybe what's really required. So
We're going to put you in the middle.
all in here. We're really trying to they say, okay, well, how do we type it out? That's what we're trying to emphasize. And then you start going out and say, comparing one vendor to another vendor. So we're going to help.
Great. That's perfect.
All right.
We are.
Yeah, it was. Glad we worked on that.
Yeah.
Also through that way as well, and then we also have an app everywhere where we're trying to
And we have spun up, we've actually spun up with Dwayne Bates there. You guys still doing that, all that work back there?
Right.
Sure. So we played with it, but I think your point about, making sure that it's not the same way. And there's so many ways we can implement.
And then there's some tricks that we can do because you can actually license a Linux SKU and then upgrade that to a Windows SKU using the licensing that you're already having, which will get you in at a lesser cost and then AWS has that ability for you to know.
Funding.
Never going to match. So, and there was a design session that was missing, so after the last design session, we were waiting for a bunch of information.
So I'll reach out. I'll make that call.
Are you saying?
Check out and go to the chat for a bit.
Derek, do you need your pencils?
I don't know what's in this bag.
That might be my only lunch.
I'm not sure how she set that timeline, honestly. It's her project, but I can look into it a little.
I would look at structure, where it's hosted as a further down the pipe, dial into what we're building, make sure we know what the model looks like. And I also suggest that you use a dev test model. So go ahead and spin up a dev, it's going to be a lot smaller. And then build it, make sure it's working, architect it's integrating with Synergy as you design. And you can do that at a very little spend. And then when you start thinking about scale, okay, now we got stuff in there. What size server do we need? And then you start looking at that.
We definitely need the advice we're getting.
Really?
Something production with 22.
Something, and I don't think you know yet.
Just sort of their default.
Right. And the way you're doing is you're buying, and so we do have a promotion right now where you can buy X number of credits ahead of time. And then you can, then we'll actually give you an extra 10%. I think it's a promotion that it was just released last week, and it just came out. Anyway, but you don't want to buy too much because those things don't carry over. It's kind of like what's the health, not the HRA. It's the other one. It's the one that doesn't carry over. Yeah, it doesn't. And so, and that's the way Azure works, that's the way AWS works, is it doesn't carry over. And so you don't want to be stuck in buying too much. So, and the nice thing is when you do buy, and I'm sure this is the same with AWS, at the end of the day, our price is probably comparable. I mean, from what we've heard, a lot of us will say that Microsoft's actually cheaper because we'll beat the price. Take that part out. It's probably comparable. But the mechanics is one with search store, and then for us at least, and this is what I don't know for AWS, is once you overspend,